Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Laura Beth Goldsmith, and I'm very excited to have parents joining us from all around the country and all around the world to talk about the news and global issues and how we can enhance our communication with our kids. I'm very excited to be speaking with all of you here today, and I am looking forward to sharing some of my expertise and Best Delegates' best expertise on how you can communicate with your kids about global issues. Before we get started, I'd love to get an idea of some of the people that we have here with us today. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Feel free to share your name, where you're from, your child's grade level, and anything that you're hoping to learn from this event today. And I loved reading all of the questions that many of you submitted in advance before the event today. It was great to see what parents are interested in and really just wanting more conversation starters and tools to discuss global issues. So thank you all for joining us today. And I'd love to introduce myself and help us get started. My name is Laura Beth Goldsmith, and I am the Executive Director of Partnerships at Best Delegate. I've been doing Model United Nations for the past 15 years, and I am incredibly passionate about Model United Nations. I started when I was a student and did it in middle school and high school, and Model UN opened up countless doors for me. It helped me decide what university I was going to go to, Emory University, where I was president and head delegate of the Model United Nations team. It helped me win over $50,000 in college scholarships and helped open doors for me to travel around the world and learn about global issues. Because of Model UN and because of my passion and interest in global issues, I've been to all 7 continents and more than 60 different countries, and I've had the opportunity to work with thousands of students, teachers, and parents around the world through Model UN. At Best Delegate, I work with all of our students, parents, schools, school districts, governments, and even the UN to set up opportunities for students to do Model United Nations. I love this activity, and I also want to share that I'm a parent as well. And I know how challenging this year has been for many parents. My son is currently too young to be learning about the news, but I am very passionate about sharing with him as he gets older about global issues. And I'm also really excited to have this event today because we constantly are speaking with our students and our student leaders, and they've been sharing with us how this year is hard and there's a lot of complicated things that are happening in the news, and they really want the chance to understand these issues in a more meaningful way. And so during this event today, we're going to do a couple of things. We are going to start by sharing 10 conversation starters for the dinner table and beyond that you can use with your own family. We're also going to share some advice on how to talk about complex issues. There's a lot of challenges happening, from COVID-19 to racial injustice to gun violence and other problems in society. And it's hard to talk about these, and we want to share some tips on how to do that. We'll also share a brief Model UN demonstration, and we will share some exciting parent resources and summer opportunities for students as well to learn more about current events and global issues. So without further ado, I want to jump in and share some conversation starters for you and your family. If you'd like to share any yourselves in the chat that you have that you use with your family that work really well, please feel free to do so. And I also want to say that growing up as a kid, I had an incredible family dinner table, and every night my family would eat together and talk about global issues and talk about what was happening in our lives and about travel and where we wanted to visit and what we were interested in. And it definitely rubbed off on me and my older brothers, who all are passionate about social issues and about the world, one of whom is an interpreter at the UN now. So I think parents have a huge impact on their children and on their interest and understanding of the world. And that's why I'm very excited about this event today and about helping the parents that we have here and that are watching this after the fact connect with your kids and talk about global issues. So the first thing that I want to share is, how do we talk about the news? How do we understand and break down the news and really understand it at a better level? Here are a couple of conversation starters you can use. You can ask, what have you heard about whatever the key story of the time is? You can also ask, what will you remember most about this? And another key question is, how do you feel about whatever event is happening? And I also would ask the question, what's the biggest questions that you have? I think when looking at the news, sometimes kids are very aware of what's happening, and sometimes they don't know what's happened yet. And then it's a parent's job to decide what they want to share, how much of that information is age appropriate for their kid, and how they're going to filter out the key statistics and information that students need. And so I think the key thing that I would recommend here is let your child lead when possible and ask them how they feel about issues. One of the questions that we got submitted in advance, I think by Rebecca, was about how do you help students understand when the issue doesn't necessarily impact them personally? And I think that's where you have to ask those questions. How would you feel in this situation? Or if you were the one who was impacted by whatever the specific event is. So, my biggest advice is let your kids lead where possible, share brief information about stories and what's happening in the world, and ask them what questions they have. Later in this event, I'll also share some great resources. The New York Times has a cool weekly quiz about the news, and a couple of other resources that you can use to integrate these issues right into your own home and family table as well. Also, I think trivia is fun and facts are interesting, and that's another great way to lead off and to engage your kids about the world and about the news. Some interesting conversation starters you can use include do you know questions, sharing interesting statistics about what's happening in the world. So, if I was going to use this at my dinner table tonight, I might share some things that are happening about COVID-19. And some interesting facts that are relevant to students. And I might share something like, did you know that 1 in 4 Americans are fully vaccinated? Or did you hear that the US will share 60 million doses of vaccines with other countries? And ask kids what they think about those types of facts. I think keeping it simple and brief to lead off is a great way to get kids talking and engaged and listening and discussing the types of things that are happening right now in the world. Another tip is to talk about travel and to talk about the world. It's fun to be creative and to imagine. I know many of us have not had the opportunity to travel recently with what's happening with COVID-19, but I think imagining the possibilities is really fun for kids and families to do at the dinner table as well. And so, a couple of tips here. I would ask questions like, if you could spend 1 year in any country, where would you go and why? And that's often a fun activity to learn about foods your kids are interested in, to learn about cultures they're interested in learning more, to understand if maybe they might have an interest in learning a certain language. It's a great way to break the ice and dive deeper into why they want to travel to a specific place. I also think another great question is, which global perspectives do you find interesting? And what's your favorite travel memory? If you've had the chance to go on any trips with your family in the past, that's a great question to ask to pull them in and to recall those fun times together. And another question that's a fun, imaginative one is, what historical event do you wish you could have experienced? And it might be that your kid wanted to be at the Olympics or to be at the UN opening ceremonies or to hear a key speech in history, whatever that might be. Let them share, and you'll learn a little bit more about their interests along the way as well. So I think travel is a great, fun, light, easy topic to discuss, and a great way to get students talking as well. Another fun category is to think about the future and to share questions and conversation starters that will get your children sharing about what they are interested in the future and what they envision for the future for themselves and for the world. So some questions I might ask here are more about, can you imagine different scenarios? If you could banish one global problem or one global issue, what would it be? We frequently ask that question at our programs. If you could solve one global issue, what would it be? And you learn a lot about kids' interests, whether it be poverty or world hunger or climate change or whatever that student is passionate about. That's a great way just to open the door and to see if they could wave a wand and solve one world issue, what would it be and why? And that's a great way to learn about their interests, and then you can dive deeper into that topic area with them. Another key question is, who do you want to be 20 years from now? The answer is still you, but who do you want to be? What do you want to be doing? What impact do you want to be having? And that can help you understand as well the future aspirations of your child. And it may change over time, but it's great to understand that as well. And I also love the question, what impact do you want to make on the world? There are a lot of challenges and a lot of problems, and asking kids about the impact that they want to make is a great way to dive a little bit deeper into some of their aspirations and ways that they can make a difference in our world as well. Another fun area for the dinner table is trivia. There's lots of great trivia apps and games that you can use as well, but I'll share a few fun trivia questions to get you started that relate to the news and to international relations. You can ask questions about the UN. You can ask things like, how many UN member states are there? Correct answer is 193. And that can just help students to think about how big the world is, how diverse it is, how many different perspectives there might be. You can also ask about the Sustainable Development Goals that we are referred to as the SDGs. You can ask how many SDGs are there? Which of these are you most passionate about? And on the UN website, there's some great resource sheets about the Sustainable Development Goals if you want to talk about those as well. You could also ask a fun trivia question like, what country most recently gained independence? And it's also the most recent country to be formally added to the UN, and that would have been South Sudan. And you could also ask questions like, who's the president of the US? Depending upon your kid's current level of engagement, you may have to start with something more simple and then ask more and more complex questions as they get interested and engaged with world news and current events. So essentially, don't be afraid to ask fun and interesting trivia questions as a way to get the conversation going about global issues as well, because you'll often get why and lots of questions following from those pieces. And Ryan, Best Delegates co-founder, also just dropped in the chat for everybody a great resource about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, so feel free to check that out as well. Another tip for conversation starters is to talk about inspiring leaders. I have so many leaders in my life that either were a personal mentor or are someone in the broader world that I have been personally inspired by. And I think that helping understand who your kids' mentors are and who they look up to can help you get to know your child better as well. And so some questions that I recommend here are, who is a leader that you look up to and why? And what issues have they had an impact on? Another fun question is, if you were the mayor of your city, what's one thing you'd change? And sometimes this could be as simple as changing school hours or as innovative as, helping solve issues around homelessness, around poverty. And I think that's a really interesting question that we frequently ask in our MUN programs as well. And students are very creative with issues that they want to solve if they were in the position of leadership. Another great question is, what makes a good leader? What are the characteristics of a good leader? And how can you be a leader in your daily life and incorporate some of those characteristics into you as you become a leader as well? So I think it's very important for students to have mentors and to have people that they look up to. And one of the cool things about a lot of the Model UN programs that we run is that students get the chance to have a trusted mentor who is a college student that has a shared passion for Model UN and global issues. And they get to ask them not only about Model UN, but about college and about their future. And so I think a great way to gain a mentor is through an activity that students are passionate about, like Model United Nations. And also there are many great teachers out there too, Model UN teachers that are awesome at serving in that capacity as well and sparking students' interest in world issues. Another awesome set of conversation starters that I recommend talking about are related to feelings. Asking students really how they're feeling at the dinner table. And there's a lot of different ways to do this, but a couple of fun questions that you might want to incorporate. Of course, how are you feeling today? Very basic and easy, just to open the door and start that conversation. One other question that I like is, what's the last thing that made you laugh? What's something funny that happened? And actually an interesting statistic that I was reading about recently was that kids laugh so much more than adults. And so it's important that we all continue to laugh, and asking kids what they laugh about and incorporating more of those types of things into their world is always a good thing too. Another conversation starter, what's your happiest memory or something recently that made you really happy as well? And one more is, how do you feel about today's current events? We constantly hear from our student leaders and our students at our programs that it can be overwhelming. and that everything happening in the news can at times make people feel a bit anxious. And I think the key thing that we have to remember is to check in with our kids and to ask them how they're feeling and to provide support as needed. And I'll get into some of those tips for support in just a few minutes. Another great set of questions is about family. The dinner table is a great place to continue to build those family bonds and to make awesome memories together. And a couple of fun questions you might consider asking include, what's your favorite family tradition we have? You might not know that having a special occasion plate makes a big difference in a student feeling excited to share special news with their family. Or it might be a Friday night meal that you share together. Whatever that tradition is, asking that question and doing more of that is a great thing you can do to bond with your kids as well. Another question, what should our next family adventure be? Where should we go together? What should we do? That's always great to ask, to know what types of activities are good for your family to do together. And another question is, what do you love about your family? As well as what's unique about us? Basically, asking questions to make students think about and reflect about their own family and about the own benefits that they have in their own household are really great conversation starters for the dinner table as well. Another good category is questions about community. So, what's your favorite thing about your school or about your friend or about Model UN or the organization that you're a part of? Just probing their interests deeper there. And what's the most fun thing you did with your friends recently? Just learning about what their day to day looks like and how they enjoy those activities. And another good question is, how can you positively impact your community, whether that's your school or the team that you're a part of, or the activities that they're engaged in? Asking how they can impact that activity as well is a great question. And our final category of conversation starters is you, asking about your child, what they like, what they enjoy, and those types of questions can have a powerful conversation as well. So questions that are great for that include, what makes you special? Why are you unique? Letting your child share what they feel is special about them. What is your favorite thing about yourself? I think oftentimes high schoolers are so focused, and middle schoolers, on the issues that they have that they forget to focus on the great things about themselves. And just asking those types of questions can be awesome too. And also asking questions about favorite books and movies and hobbies, as well as what's made you happy, and things that you enjoy are great ways to talk about your child and to get them sharing as well. So those were just some of our starter conversations about how to really discuss the news and communicate and engage with your children. And I really want to dive into now some tips for how to do that, because many of these questions are surface level, but they might get into some deeper issues, especially as we see in the news every day. There's a lot of complex things that kids are feeling overwhelmed by, and most parents are not satisfied by the amount of media that kids consume, as well as what they're reading and how it makes them feel. So here are some tips when talking about the news with your kids to help make things more digestible and better for them to understand and to process. First tip is to limit exposure to breaking news. There is constantly another breaking news alert from CNN or whatever news sources you watch, but it's not necessarily good to have the news on 24/7 in the background in your house, or to be constantly getting those phone alerts, because it can make it feel overwhelming for kids that there's always things going wrong, because so often we see negative news stories rather than positive news stories via those breaking news alerts. So personally, over the last 5 years, I too had to change my news consumption because it got overwhelming to see so much negative news in the evening. I primarily read and watch the news in the morning and limit my news exposure in the evening as well. And I used to have the news on very, very frequently in the background, and now I choose when I'm digesting the news and when I have it off. Another thing to consider is your child's maturity and age. We'll drop in a few specific recommended articles in a few minutes, but it is important to think about, what news should my kid be getting, if any, related to this topic, and how can I introduce the relevant facts? But most importantly is to help make sure that your child feels safe. There are so many news stories that make kids feel vulnerable, and reinforcing their personal safety is a key thing that you want to be doing as you talk about these complex global issues. It's also important to ask open-ended questions. What have you heard about this topic? How are you feeling? That is so important because your child isn't expected to solve all of these world problems, but they are hearing a lot of it. So they're expected to digest it. And most kids have feelings when they're hearing about and experiencing COVID-19 or hearing about gun violence or racial injustice. And these are really big problems. So it's important to check in and ask your kids, how they're feeling and be available to talk about these problems as well. And it's also important to give facts, context, and resources. And one of the questions that we got in advance from a parent was about what do you do when your kids are reading fake news and they're seeing articles that might not be credible? It's important to talk to kids about fake news as well and to share that much of what is shared on social media at times, on many of the platforms that kids are on, things that might go viral on Instagram or TikTok or elsewhere if your kids are on those platforms, isn't always accurate. And so it's important to check reliable and credible news sources as well when you're learning about and digesting information. And most importantly, just let your kids express themselves. These issues are issues that people feel strongly about, and talking about them can often make a big difference. This year, we ran an awesome current events course, and we've been running Model UN teams. And just giving students a space to talk about problems, we've seen, students feeling overwhelmed about the news of the day when they walk in, but feeling more comfortable after discussing it and digesting it and talking about how they want to change the world for the future and help solve these large systematic problems that are happening in society today. So those are a few tips for how you can approach these complex issues that are happening in your students' lives and how you can talk about the news at the dinner table and communicate with your kids. And now I'd love to show a brief video for all of you. I don't know how many of you have a child that's done Model UN before. If you want to share in the chat, you're welcome to do so. You're welcome to share if you have a student that's done Model UN or if you've never seen Model UN before. But basically, Model United Nations is an incredible opportunity for students to step into the shoes of global leaders to discuss and debate global issues. So they may attend a simulation and represent a specific country, whether that be the United States or Russia or Canada or any other country, to talk about a global problem such as climate change. So I'm going to share a quick less than 1 minute video with all of you of a student who was doing a practice simulation about climate change recently at one of our programs, because I want to share that Model UN is a way and a vehicle for students to understand, digest, and discuss global issues, and also gain that valuable perspective about global issues and diversity. So here's a short video that is showing a student giving a speech in a Model UN practice simulation about climate change.
Fellow delegates and honorable chairperson, did you know that if action isn't taken against climate change, large parts of the United Kingdom and even the whole world could be completely submerged underwater or even destroyed or wiped of life? That's why we need everybody to help. A way even you can make an impact is to replace your old gasoline car with a brand new electric car, and it eliminates CO2 emissions, so it's great for you and the environment. But, you say, aren't those expensive? Well, we in the UK government have actually made electric cars cheaper than gas-powered cars. That's why us in the UK are telling you to help stop global climate change and to take action. We recommend you to switch to an electric car. Thank you. I yield my time to the chair people. Thank you.
All right, I hope everyone enjoyed seeing that short clip of one student engaged in a Model UN practice simulation. As you can see on the screen here, there were many different students that got to serve as speakers and talk about these global problems. So now I'd love to share some specific resources and summer opportunities with everyone. And I promise, as Ryan mentioned, that speech was not sponsored. Our students feel really passionately about global issues and they enjoy getting to represent and talk about different problems, and they show up passionate to and ready to talk about world issues, and they love getting to dive in and represent different perspectives of different countries. So now I'd love to share some resources and summer opportunities with all of you that can help your family and can help your students talk about global issues. So a few resources, and I'd like to thank Ryan in advance. He's going to drop some of these into the chat for all of you. And we'll also be sending out the recording of this and all of the resources via email as well. So a few resources that we have for families to get started. We have an awesome debate guide on learning how to debate diplomatically in Model UN and the real world. And this is a guide that's great for your students, especially middle school and high school level students, to read through. It has tips on how to be diplomatic about controversial issues, what to do and what not to do, and examples of diplomatic and undiplomatic behavior in the real world. So I definitely recommend checking out that guide. It's a great resource for your students as they're involved in debate and simulations, and also for parents as you're talking about world issues. We're also going to drop in a few articles as well about how to discuss the world news with your kids. And we're also going to share with you a few upcoming events. We constantly have events happening for students as well as for parents as well as for teachers, because we want to support the greater Model UN community as they are helping students navigate this complex world. So if you check out our website, we have an events page and you can see all of the upcoming events. We have student events coming up. We have a student public speaking activity happening in 2 weeks. We have a teacher event next week to help teachers jumpstart their Model UN programs. And we have parent events happening, open houses at Model UN simulations if you'd like to see Model UN up close, as well as future events every month to help support parents and the Model UN community. So we're really excited to be able to support the MUN community, and we want to thank you all for joining us as well. And I want to also share with you about our summer camps and our summer opportunities for students to dive in and learn more. So if your student is interested in global issues, or if they're not interested yet and you want to help them get interested in global issues, I highly recommend checking out the virtual MUN Institute. And there's also the link for that. It is our website, learnmodelun.com. And if you are checking out our programs, students don't just have the opportunity to learn about global issues, they also have the opportunity to live it. What's unique about Model UN is that students step into the shoes of global leaders to tackle today's most pressing problems. So as we were talking about the news, instead of just talking about it, they're living it, and they're trying to solve global issues from the perspective of different countries, whether they're representing Mexico, Egypt, Bulgaria, or any other country. They are gaining a better understanding of that country, of the government's perspective from that country, and of the issues that they're examining. And at our programs, it's really a jumping off point for your kids' Model UN journey. I saw some familiar names and faces here today. Many of our students have attended the virtual MUN Institute programs in the past. We run summer programs for students in grades 5 through 12, and that is a great way for students to jumpstart their Model UN journey. Or your student may have participated in one of our Model UN teams, our public and private teams, where students of all experience levels can learn together and compete at Model UN conferences. And we also have students that have joined us for our training conferences, our advanced invitational conferences, and coming up, we have our Tournament of Champions. So there are many entry ways for your student to start Model UN, and attending Model UN camp is not a one-time thing. It is a way to open your students' doors for them to participate in this incredible activity throughout middle school and high school. And many students even go on to do it in college. Colleges love Model UN, and many of the top colleges have the top Model UN programs in the country. And it is an influencing factor among decision makers looking at college applications on students' admissions as well, because they recognize that Model UN has a strong benefit on students' leadership, on their public speaking, on their global understanding, and many of those other key skills. So definitely recommend jumping into Model UN, and the summer is a great time to do so. And if you are interested in summer programs, we do have programs available for students in grades 5 through grades 12 of any experience level. We have our programs that are great for beginner students that are new to Model UN, which include our diplomat, junior diplomat, and mini diplomat program. We also have programs for advanced students looking to hone their skills and win awards and compete in Model UN. And those are our ambassador and junior ambassador programs. And we also have programs for students that want to participate in crisis style MUN. So instead of representing an individual country, they often represent a different individual person. And crisis is a really fast paced simulation, and it's a great way for students to improve their impromptu public speaking skills, their creativity, and more. So I definitely recommend checking out our summer programs. There's a program for every student, regardless of their level, to grow and learn. And specifically, it's really fun. It's a great way to defeat Zoom burnout and save the world every week. Students get to pick conversations and topics that you're interested in. So if you're having conversations at the dinner table about racial justice or about the Olympics or gender equality, we have program weeks that are themed on all of those topics, and your child can sign up for the topics that they're most interested in. And we recommend, joining for multiple weeks if they can, because it's a great way to enhance their skills, dive deep into different topics that they're passionate about, and make friends and have a lot of fun along the way. I know we've talked about a lot of the academic elements of Model UN today, but truly it's just a blast. It's a really fun way to socialize, to visit, and to enjoy your summer and to enjoy other like-minded peers that care about global issues or learning about global issues and the world. And at our programs, essentially it's fun and games and learning along the way. Our programs start off with icebreakers and public speaking games and activities. There's mini debates all throughout the program, Shark Tank-like pitches where you get to talk about your recommendations and solutions for the world. There are final simulations, a 2-day final simulation for students where they get to dive deep into a specific topic that the week is focused upon. So it's a really fun week, and students walk away having had a lot of fun and made really good friends. We have many students that come back year after year and choose to come back with a group of friends that they've made at our programs as well. And I'd love to take a few minutes now to answer any questions that anyone might have about Model UN, about global issues, about how to talk to your kids about the news and these complicated challenges as well. So I'll stop sharing my screen for just a minute and see if anyone has any questions that they'd like to submit. Please feel free to drop those questions into the chat and we can answer them as well. So please feel free to drop in any questions if you have any about the news or about Model UN. And I do see one question that we got in the chat. Will we be sharing this event and the resources? Absolutely, we will send it out via email. We'll post it up on our events page, the recording, and we will also share the resource links. And thank you, Susan, for joining us. We've been working with your students all year, and we've really enjoyed getting to help actually the school HSMSE build up their Model UN program. So it's great to see you here today as well. And I'd also love to answer another question that I see. One question we got was, how do you discuss the constant news about violence and death in the community? That's a great question. Thank you so much for writing that one in. I think the key piece of advice that I would have when you're talking about the news at the dinner table is to balance it. It's hard to always talk about the really heavy conversations. You want to have those conversations too, but pull in some of the fun ones as well. Talk about the Oscars or talk about some of the cool new things that are happening. If you watched Biden's speech the other night, for example, about the idea of universal preschool or positive components as well. So we've dropped in a link as well to an article about what to say to your kids when the news is scary and how to dump into explaining that. So I highly recommend checking out that resource as well. And Elaine asked, how can we make sure we are working towards being inclusive and celebrating diversity? That's a great question and something that is incredibly important. My biggest recommendation is to have the conversations about inclusivity, to have conversations about racial justice, to have conversations about hate crimes, if your student is the right age and is mature enough and ready for those conversations. Because in order to have a more diverse and inclusive and accepting society, we have to be willing to talk about these hard issues, and we have to be willing to, have those conversations with our kids and with our families. And honestly, Model UN is a great vehicle to do so in an environment where kids are comfortable opening up with their peers. Sometimes it's hard to get kids to talk to their parents about some of these topics. And I often see that when a group of students is digesting an issue together, they're able to help each other break down and understand topics in a really cool and meaningful way. And I also see that with our college level mentors. They are able to connect so well with our other high schoolers, and our student leaders are as well. And that helps them to relate, to understand, and to break down these issues. So my biggest tip is don't be afraid to talk about hard issues and to let your kid lead at times. And also Model UN. It's a great solution to getting people to participate and talk about these types of problems. I see a great question in the chat as well from Anna. She asked, how do you encourage your children to understand nuance? A lot of political dialogue right now is really black and white, and I see kids not seeing that some issues are complex and there are reasonable arguments and concerns on opposing sides. That is a great question, Anna. And I think the key thing is actually asking, why do you think people might see this issue from another way, or how? And in Model UN, and when we do our debates, we actually ask people to take both sides. And so, for example, climate change. If you're representing a different country, that country may have a viewpoint that's different from your own. And you have to do the research and dive in to understand why is a country taking those actions and how. So I think the bottom line on helping kids understand nuance and helping kids understand an issue is asking, why do you think someone might feel differently about this topic, and really diving deep into some of those reasons that might be the case. And you may have very strong feelings on any topic, whether that be mandatory vaccines or a question around gun violence or guns in schools. And these questions are challenging, but I think the key is letting students think about and represent different sides. And as Ryan just shared, that is one of the biggest benefits of Model UN, is representing different points of view, because it challenges students to step outside of their own world and understand different questions. And I'll share a short story. I was teaching Model UN a few years ago, actually in India, and we were doing a simulation, and there was a student that was representing Pakistan, and they felt very strongly as a whole against anyone from Pakistan because they had had a family member that was injured in the conflicts that had happened between India and Pakistan. And by participating in that simulation, for the first time ever, they let go of a lot of that hate, and they understood there are people on all sides, and these issues are more complex and not so black and white. And when I can step into the shoes of a different country or a different person and try to understand where they're coming from, it can make a huge difference. The same thing happens on topics of gender equality. We've worked with many students from all over the world who haven't necessarily thought about the challenges that women face in, at home life or in the workplace or in a variety of different ways. And I was running a simulation around gender equality, and we had some amazing breakthroughs from students from the US as well as from the Middle East that had never really thought about how important universal, paid leave is after having a child, or about equal pay for equal work, and many of these topics. So I think that Model UN is a vehicle for students to understand the nuance and to understand the complexities of global issues, as well as to understand them from different points of view, as well as opposing points. So at your house, I'd encourage you to just dive deeper into the issues, ask them why you think other people may feel differently, share some of the facts and statistics from the other side of a topic or argument or conversation, and essentially have those conversations at home and allow your students to have those types of simulations in a Model UN or school environment as well. You're very welcome, Anna. I'm happy to be able to share a little bit more about that. Does anyone have any other questions about Model UN or about dinner table topics to discuss and talk about the very challenging issues that are happening right now in the world? I got a funny question about how do you find out what kinds of gifts or things your students might be interested in and want those from their parents? That's a fun, lighthearted question. I think some of those prompts around if you could travel anywhere, have anything, or one thing, what would it be and why? I think don't be afraid to ask, and you can ask it in the context of a lot of different questions, and you may find out some interesting answers about where your kids want to travel or what kind of books they might be interested in. And that's another thing I'll share too is if you are trying to help your student gain, global perspective, there's a lot of great books and movies that can prompt discussion as well. And we have some articles on Best Delegate as well that are recommend some different pieces. So I'll share some resources in follow up via email. But I think the key is just start talking, start discussing these global problems, and that is a great way to jump in. Are there any final questions that anybody has about Model UN or about our program? All right, then with that, I just want to say thank you all so much for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed this event and learned a little bit about how you can connect with your kids and communicate about world issues. And if your student would be interested in joining us at the MUN Institute this summer, we are running a promotion now through May 15th. The special discount code is Summer Fun, and that will get you $35 off every week of our program. So I hope that you've enjoyed learning a little bit about ways you can discuss the news and about Model United Nations. And I just want to say thank you to all of you that took your time out of your day to join us today, and to all of you who are watching this after the fact. We really appreciate everything you do to help empower your kids for the next generation of change makers and world leaders. Thank you all, and I hope that you have a great day.